Hi everyone! In the last lesson, you modeled a simple graph from scratch. Now it's time to level up with your first real-world project. You'll build a mini professional network similar to LinkedIn with the entities of people, companies, skills, and relationships that bring it all together. This will help you see how structured connected data is way more powerful than disconnected rows and columns. We'll also learn how to import CSV files using Memgraph Lab's Import UI tool for the no-code approach. Let's first look at our graph schema. We provided 4 CSV files to get you started. Firstly, we have a people CSV file, which includes names, titles, locations, and the age of people. Then we have company CSV file showing where people worked. Alongside, we also included skills CSV file detailing what people know and what are their skills. And finally, we also included relationship CSV file mentioning who knows who and who works where and how we can connect our nodes. Each file represents either nodes or relationships in your graph. We provided all of these files in the links in the email, so feel free to follow along. Let's now import those files in Memgraph. In Memgraph Lab, go to the Import tab in the sidebar and choose CSV file import. Here you can either choose to merge with the current dataset, or you can drop the database and start from scratch. Since my database is empty, it's not important which one I choose. Now here, I'm going to drag and drop all of the files that I want to import. First of all, that is the people CSV file. Next up is company CSV file. Then we have a skills CSV file. And lastly, relationship CSV file. Now that I've uploaded all of my files, I'm going to start configuring each of them. Let's start first with configuring people CSV file. To the left, you can see that Memgraph detected the first row of the file. It detected the header of the file as well as the first row of the properties. This serves the purpose of configuring your file more easily because you can see what is happening within your file. Since this CSV is related to nodes, we're going to start by configuring that node. And we first need to label our node. Since this is a people CSV, we're going to label this with person label. After that, we have to add a property to the label. Now, you can choose from the drop-down all the properties that Memgraph detected within the file, and we're going to add all of those. ID property is the most important one, since we will use ID property to create connections between the nodes. So ID property is ID property, so this is where you choose how to name it within your database, and here you're defining the type. Since all of my IDs are integer type, I'm going to put the integer type here. And I want my IDs to be unique. I want them to be required because I need ID to connect the nodes. And do I want to index it? Indexes serve as making your database faster. So if you're importing a large data set, having an index on the property that you're going to use for the import will make your life much easier. You can see that here you have a node that indexes data carefully, as indexes do speed up queries, but also take up memory. So if you have a larger graph, I would recommend creating an index. But since here we don't have that big of a graph, I'm not going to create one this time. Let's add the rest of the properties. So we have a name property, which is a string type. We have a title, which is also a string. Next up is location. And last of all is age. Age is always an integer, so I'm going to define the integer type. Now, what would you like to do in the case of duplicates? So if my data set or my CSV files have duplicates, I would want them to be merged. So I don't want the same nodes within my database. And I'm going to identify duplicate by the ID property. So I want my IDs to be unique. You can choose any other property, but then you have to think about, can one person have, like, can two people have same names? Can two people have the same title? Can they live in the same location? And mostly the answer is yes. So identify duplicates by ID is the safest way. There are some other options of filtering or adding additional data filter, but in our case, we don't need that. So I would say that this is the end of configuration for the people CSV file. Now let's head on to the next file, which will be the company CSV file. For the companies, the process is almost the same. So this is also a node CSV file. So we're going to add a node and label it company. I'm going to add all of the properties. So the ID, which is type integer, it is unique and it is required. Next property is the name property, which is a string property. Next up, industry, and last, the location. And again, this is it. I want to merge everything in case of duplicates, and I want to identify duplicates by the ID property. Okay, let's go on to the next file, which is a skills.csv file. The process is the same, so skills relates to a node, so we're going to create a node with the label skill. We're going to add all the properties we have available, which are the ID and name. And I want my IDs to be unique and required, and I want to merge everything in case of duplicates by the ID property. Now, here is where I want to make a note. You have to make sure that your IDs are unique within all of the files you have. So make sure you don't have the same ID within people CSV file and maybe skills CSV file or company CSV file. So make sure all of the ID values are unique. In that case, you're going to avoid the duplicates and you're going to properly import your graph. Lastly, let's configure our relationship CSV file. Before we do that, I want to show you again what the CSV file looks like, because here we have multiple types of relationships we need to configure. So this is the content of the relationship CSV file. Here you can see that we have multiple types of relationships we need to configure. So knows, works at, and has skill. And for each of those, we have different properties. So we can see that the type knows and works at has property sense, and has skill has property level. So when we're configuring, we need to know the content of our file, because that way we can easily configure it within Memgraph Lab. Now let's go on with configuring our relationship CSV file. Since this is related to relationships, we're going to add an edge here. And we're going to add a different edge for each of the relationship types we have within our CSV file. So in our case, we're going to add 3 different edge types. First one is the knows edge type. Now, as already mentioned, you have a preview of your file to the left, but it's important to know the content of your file, because this doesn't tell us how many different types do we have, what properties do we have, and which properties relate to which type. What are the labels of the start and end node? So this is one of the things I wanted to mention as well. If we go back to our file, we can see that we have these 2 columns, start ID and end ID. These 2 columns represent the nodes we'll be connecting with this relationship. Start node ID means that we're going to find the node that has this ID. We're going to find the other node that has the end node ID, and we're going to create a connection type knows between those nodes. Our people CSV file have the IDs of 1 to 3 until 10. Our company files has the ID of 100 and so on, and our skills file have the ID of 300 and so on. So here we can see that the type knows connects person with a person. Type works at connects person with a company, and type has skill connects person with a skill. This is important to know when you're configuring your file. Now let's go back to the configuration. The next step is to configure the start node and the end node. Now, as I mentioned in our file, a person is connected or knows another person. We're going to connect them by their ID property. So the ID property of a node corresponds to the start ID property from our CSV file. As well as for the end node, the ID property of the end node corresponds to the end ID of our file. That's it for the nodes. Now we want to import all the properties that we have. Just a reminder that we have a sense property that relates to the knows and works at type, and level property that relates to has skill type. We're going to add, in this case, sense property, which is an integer, and we're also going to add an ID property, which every relationship has. This is also an integer. ID property is not important when importing our nodes and connecting them, but it's important in case of duplicates, but I want to merge by the ID property. And this is it for our edge configuration, but we're missing one key detail. So since we have 3 different types in our CSV file, we need to make sure that not all of them are imported each time we're configuring each of the edges. So here we want only these few rows to be important for the node type. So here we want to add an additional data filter. We want to import only the edges that have the type nose. So I want to import data on the CSV column type, value equals to nose. So only those rows. And that's it for the configuration of our first edge type. Now let's go on to the second edge type, which will be the works at edge type. Works at edge type connects people to the companies they work for, and they have a since property. So here we have works at edge type. We have people that work at a certain company, and we're connecting them by their ID property. ID property of each node corresponds to either start ID or the end ID. I want to import the since property as well, which is an integer, and I want to import the ID property, and I want to merge everything by that property. Now I want to add again an additional data filter, and I want to import only the edge type works at. So I want my column type to have the value of works at. And that's it for our second edge type. We need to configure the Haskell edge type. That's the last one left. So our Haskell edge type connects people with the skills they have and has an the level property. So our last edge type has skill. It connects person to certain skill, and it's also connected by the ID property of a node. Again, we want to import our ID property, which is an integer, and we want to import our level property, which is a string. We also want to merge everything by the ID property, and we want to add an additional data filter. We want our CSV column type to have the value of has skill. And that's it for our edge configuration. Now we're ready to import our data. And that's it. All that's left to do is to import our files. Let's start importing. And Memgraph will validate your files for you. If something is wrong with the files, it will let you know in this step and not allow you to import any further. Now let's go on to the next step, which is uploading all of that to Memgraph. And it was successful in no time. And and the last step is database cleanup, and our import was successful. I would say that this was really easy. And that's it. If you exit the screen, you can see that you now have 15 new nodes and 18 new edges in your database. If you want to reuse some of the old queries you ran because you don't want to write them again, or you're not sure how you wrote them, you have a Run History tab. Here you can see the history of all of the previous queries you ran. And I'm going to reuse this query, which visualizes my graph, and run it in current view. And then after running this, you'll be able to see how the query executes. With this query, as I mentioned, this is the query that returns all of the paths in our graph, and we are able to see the entire graph that we have. And here you go. This is our data set in a graph form. We successfully imported all of our data. Your task for this lesson is simple. Just import these CSVs, run the query, and visualize your graph and start exploring. You're now working with real connected data. Great job! In the next lesson, you'll learn how to query your knowledge graph for valuable insights using Cypher. I'll see you then. Bye!